so glad you're here. Welcome to our third annual Hospice Tea. What a great showing of support for the hospice staff and volunteers this is. As we go forward through this program, you'll hear this again, but can we just take one quick second and give a round of applause to all of our volunteers and staff?
Before we pray, two things. One, I want to thank Beth Hunter for her playing the harp this afternoon. As always, it's just so beautiful. Thank you very much, Beth. And probably none of us need this reminder, but I just think it's the right thing to do to call attention to the fact that 13 years ago today, a tragedy struck our nation. It changed our lives in one way or another. And before I speak a prayer, I'd like for us to share a moment of silence together, remembering all of those who lost their lives that day. Will you bow with me now?
6.5 years ago, I had a phone call from somebody in Asheville. And this person said, "I'm from Channel 13, and I'd love to come over and do a story." I was like, cool. Jay came over, and we did our first story. But what came from that was I was blessed to meet a man who not only was a news reporter, but took his standards of ethics to a level that shone the brightness of his heart and his spirit. Not only that, as we became better acquainted and then became friends, he is a great man of faith. And when you think about somebody who has a great faith, who believes in ethical behavior, you look at someone that you are richly blessed by knowing and by sharing moments with. And knowing Jay, and when I asked him if he would come and speak, all I could think about was what a wonderful blessing you're going to receive by having him share these moments with you. Jay is a phenomenal, phenomenal man, and we are richly honored to have him share with us this afternoon. So please join with me in welcoming Mr. Jay Siltzer.
Well, thank you all. Bonnie called me a few weeks ago, and she asked me if I would speak today. And I said, well, I'm going to be over in Franklin that day anyway. I said, what's the topic? She said, well, it's hospice. I said, well, that's kind of uncomfortable. But having been in TV now for more than 20 years, it was not the most uncomfortable situation I've been in. You see, about 20 years ago, in fact, 20 years ago next month, I was in Johnson City, Tennessee, working for Channel 11 there. And the producers, the story editors, they sent me out on a story to cover or uncover a bunch of women who had failed to dress properly at strip clubs. Yes, they had failed to wear their pasties and G-strings at the club. And all 30 some odd of them were at the courthouse. And it was my job to go down there and talk to them. Uncomfortable. The producer then calls me right before 5 o'clock and she says, well, not only do I want you to cover the story, but I want you to interview one of these women live at 5 o'clock. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm thinking, if she can't keep her clothes on, do I really want her talking into a live mic? Nope, producer said nope, want her live, 5 o'clock, do it, see you then. okay. So 5 o'clock rolls around. The open to the newscast comes on. This is Eyewitness News 11. The anchor tosses to me, Jay Siltzer is live at the City County building. That's right, Chris. I'm here with China Rose. Literally. Miss Rose was among more than 30 women arrested earlier today on charges of indecent exposure. Miss Rose, thank you for joining me. Your reaction to the arrest. I put the mic out. She put her hand on my shoulder. And on live TV, she said, "Oh, Jay, darling, it's so good to see you again." That was uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable. I let her ramble. I don't know what she said. Finally, she quit talking. And the only thing I could think to say was, "Chris, Miss Rose will go before a judge next week." I was mortified. It was uncomfortable. A lot of things in life make us uncomfortable. Maybe nothing more so than dying. And that's basically, when we're talking about hospice, what we're talking about. We're talking about a comfortable death. And yet, it makes us so uncomfortable. Why? Because we have to think about change. We think about our own mortality. And I've been there. I have personally been there. In 1999, I was working in Knoxville, and to continue receiving health insurance, I received a form. "You haven't had a physical lately, go get one, so your insurance benefits will continue." So I went to my doctor. In fact, a doctor I'd had for many years, still down in South Carolina from when I was a kid. I drove home to see my parents. Saw my doctor. He said, "How is everything?" I'm like, "Great, just sign this so I can get out of here. You know, this is uncomfortable." He said, "You sure everything's okay?" I said, "Yeah, you know, I'm really healthy. I watch my weight. I eat pretty well. Running 18 miles a week. You know, pulled a groin muscle running the other week." That got his attention. He said, "Really? Let me see." Well, an hour later, I was at a urologist's office. It was clear that what I thought was a pulled groin muscle was much more than that. And later that day, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Yeah, I saw the guys go, "Ooh, yeah, I know. It's uncomfortable, more ways than one. Yeah, testicular cancer." So I realized that I would be undergoing surgery, probably radiation, and maybe chemotherapy. I also had to call my boss back in Knoxville and tell her I wouldn't be coming back to work for a while. Tell her this. So I got on the phone, uncomfortable. "Desiree, this is Jay. I've gotten testicular cancer. I'm not going to be at work for a while." "What?" "Desiree, this is Jay. I've gotten testicular cancer. I'm not going to be at work for a while." "What?" "Desiree, I've got testicular cancer, and I'm not going to be at work for a while." And with the compassion only the news industry can bring. "Oh, really? Great, great. We'll come do a story on that for Sweeps." Uncomfortable. But you know something? She made me go public with it, and I'm glad she did, because I hope it's been an opportunity to help others learn about the disease, maybe prevent the disease, and know how to treat the disease. Well, the radiation ended. Chemo ended. Surgery was over. I went back to work in 4 weeks' time. It was really quick. And I got back to work, and I thought I was doing really well. I thought, well, you know, I'm really not going to say anything to anybody about it. They know what happened. They did stories on it. I'm just going to kind of let it go. You know, Elsa, Frozen, just let it go. So I got back to work, looked on my desk, and there's this yellow Walmart ball. Have you ever seen the rollback guy? The yellow guy with the smiley guy? Yeah. It was the ball, and there was a note with it from my co-anchor, "Dear Jay, this is to replace the one that got away." It takes a minute, process. Uncomfortable. But what that did was break the ice and allow me to joke about it, to talk about it, and to know that other people around me who cared about me and who loved me were also comfortable talking about it and laughing about it. My comfort level improved. So much so that later on that year, I took a job on the other side of the mountain, here at WLOS TV. And life was good. Until February 2nd, 2000. I woke up. I told my wife I had no feeling from the waist down. She's like, "Yeah, I bet you don't. You had one too many drinks at dinner last night." I'm like, no, I really don't have any feeling from the waist down. She got me back to my doctor in South Carolina. And within a few hours, it was clear my cancer was back. It was in my back. It had wrapped around my spinal cord, and it had left me paralyzed. I had just had a scan 3 weeks earlier. It happened like that. That was uncomfortable. I would undergo more radiation treatment, 16 weeks of violent chemotherapy. And after that, because of the paralysis, I had to learn how to walk again from scratch. And let me just tell you, there were a couple of times during this, my blood counts got so low, and my energy was so low, and my hospitalizations had graduated from Greenwood, South Carolina to Greenville, South Carolina to Indianapolis, that I thought I was going to die. And I remember at one point, someone saying, "Do you think we should call hospice? Do you think we should call hospice?" That was uncomfortable. What it did make me do, though, was, as best I could, take stock of my life. Realize I might not survive. And realize, too, that those people from hospice were there if I needed them, to do what they could to make me comfortable, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Now, by the grace of God, somehow I came out the other end. And I really mean that. I don't think there's a medical explanation for why I'm still here. But 10 months after my recurrence, I went back to work. Yeah, I was proud of that. I was proud of that. I remember the first night being back at work, my photographer telling me that, you really can't walk and we're covering a rock slide and, well, I'm just gonna let you sit on the rocks here and just do your thing. Worked fine. Second night back on the job, I was in Andrews. And the infrastructure in the town had kind of sunk from flooding. And he said, well, tonight I'm going to put the tripod basically on your butt. You're going to sit on it. And you'll look like you're standing, but you're really not. It worked great. I hobbled back to the car, did the story. Everything was great. It was a little uncomfortable, but I did it. Live shot looked okay. People at home didn't know the difference. Except one woman. She called me in the newsroom. Now, thank goodness then we didn't have Facebook, Twitter, all this junk where somebody can, just instantly chew you out. She called me. Are you Jay Siltzer? Yes, ma'am. I want you to know something. I bet you do. Next time you come over here to Andrews, make sure you hadn't been drinking. I was hobbling around doing my best to get back to work, and she thought I was drunk. And that was uncomfortable. Thankfully, though, I fired back quickly, man, to come back to your town again, I'll have to be drunk. I'm not known for being diplomatic. I'm sure I've offended you here today, and if I have, good, I've done my job. Maybe you'll remember it. After surviving the second round of cancer, my wife and I knew that we wanted to have a child. The cancer had taken its toll on me, and biologically it wasn't possible. So we began the adoption process, and it led us to Ethiopia, where we adopted our son Malachi. Malachi, being from Ethiopia, is far darker than I am. And it's really been interesting over the years how uncomfortable that has been for some people. And for me, it's been hilarious. I remember right after we got Malachi and brought him back to this country, I went to a Relay for Life event, and I was on the survivor lap, and I carried him. Lady came up to me and she said, I just had no idea your first wife was black. I didn't either. She's right over there. Uncomfortable. A lot of things uncomfortable with Malachi. He says what he thinks too. I remember he was 3 years old. He and I went to Applebee's. And he's like, Daddy, what's that? The Budweiser sign over the bar. I said, oh, it says Budweiser, King of Beers. That's all I said. Next day, we're in Ingalls, Sunday afternoon. Guy turns the corner. He's got a cart full of Budweiser. I mean, that's all it is. Guy comes by. Malachi's like, hey, man, you've got the King of Beers. Uncomfortable. You see the theme here, right? Uncomfortable. The most uncomfortable thing, though, happened to me 3 years ago, and happened to my wife. We had gone to the beach. She had cut her finger, and it wouldn't heal. She went to her doctor back in Asheville, and she got the call. And to Kelly, the worst thing in the world was being on the prayer list at church. Kelly always had this idea that there were too many people on the prayer list, people with hangnails in her mind. And she always said only the seriously ill needed to be on it. She got off the phone with this doctor. She threw down the phone on the couch. And she said, well, I just got my name on the prayer list at church. I'm going to die. And without missing a beat, I said, well, before you go, will you help me make my profile on Match.com? You didn't laugh at that one too much, did you? And then we hugged and we cried. She had been diagnosed with a rare type of leukemia that could not be treated. And that was uncomfortable. She would undergo an unsuccessful stem cell transplant. And after the first one failed, I remember telling her, you know, I think if this were me, I would call hospice. She didn't take that route. She wanted every day she could have with her child and our son. And she chose to go back to Duke a second time and endure a second stem cell transplant, which failed and resulted in her death in July. And that was uncomfortable. In our minds, we knew what the outcome was going to be. I would never criticize her for the choices she made. She wanted to live for her child, and she fought to the end. I wish I could say and stand here and say that she had a peaceful, wonderful death. It wasn't. She was still receiving treatment at Duke until the end. And the death was uncomfortable. What though was even more uncomfortable for me was in the receiving line at the funeral home. We did a couple of visitations. We had the funeral. This was down in Union, South Carolina. Anybody know where that is? Union? Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's right there with Andrews on my list. So I'm in line, fifth lady in line. She comes up to me, she grabs my hand. I just want you to know how sorry I am. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being sorry. It's a very hard time for us. And when you're ready, I want you to meet my daughter. A little uncomfortable. A little uncomfortable. But over the years, whether going through my own battles with cancer, the adoption of my son, or the death of my wife, where I have found comfort is through my faith. And holding tight to that, and finding that in spite of trials, my faith gets stronger. And it gets stronger because I see people reaching out to me, helping me, loving me, and making things more comfortable. And you see, that's what you do. By being involved in hospice, that's what you do. You make things more comfortable. Maybe you are there with the patient when they're sick, when they're dying. Maybe you can't do that. That's hard. Maybe you're there with the family. Maybe you're cooking them dinner. Maybe you picked up the phone and called them. Maybe you sent a gift card. Maybe you decided that caregiver who's been in that room with that patient day in, day out needed a break, and you went and took a shift. Maybe you opened up your checkbook to hospice because you physically can't do it, but you can provide someone else who can. Being here today, you are making things more comfortable. Thank you, all of you, for being here and doing the uncomfortable. Thank you for making patients, their families, and their caregivers comfortable in the worst of times.
I want to talk with you briefly about hospice in Macon County. Our hospice team has been very fortunate in that we are able to serve over 100 families per year, which means patients and families, which is a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of care and service to families in our community. And that would not be possible if it weren't for our hospice team. Another thing I'd like to mention is the fact that when we talk about hospice care, as Jay talked about, he talked about a cancer condition, but hospice treats more than just cancer. We treat a lot of patients with other types of illnesses as well. So when you think about folks in your community, those who are living with a life-limiting illness, anything from heart failure to renal failure, anything like that also classifies as a life-limiting illness, and we can serve those patients as well. And I want to thank each of every one of you for coming out today and supporting hospice as we continue our efforts in the community. Thank you.
And what if trials of this life, the rain that storms the hardest nights, are your mercies in disguise?
I think that song really sums up what we are as a hospital, as a home health and hospice. Your blessings can come in so many ways. We are blessed by you. So please, thank you again for being here. Thank you for sharing with us. We are just grateful that you've taken this time this afternoon to be with us. And thank you for sharing a part of yourselves during this time. We are just pleased and privileged that you've chosen to share this afternoon with us. Thank you very much.